in politics with the car haul contract. The car haul contract is better than the one that he negotiated, and by the way, his in 2008 was rejected by the members. And he also forgot to get the work preservation agreement signed and tried to claim that he did. He didn't. He went to the NLRB. The NLRB rejected that. Fred sold the members a bill of goods and said, you got work preservation, and it's signed by Allied, and the fact is it wasn't. So, I don't need any lectures from someone who has been such a failure. And by the way, Fred, I was wrong, and I'm going to admit it. When I said you lost half of our members, it went from a little over 9,200 down to 4,200, so that's just a little more than half the members.
Mr. Zuckerman, 45 seconds.
Look, there's not a lot of truth in that either. Ken doesn't understand that in 2008, when we negotiated that contract, there were 3 manufacturers that were in bankruptcy or close to bankruptcy. Ford Motor Company mortgaged everything that they had and borrowed money so that they could avoid bankruptcy. General Motors and Chrysler had gone into bankruptcy, and the government had to bail them out. Those were pretty tough times back then. There's no question about that. You got to understand, these car haul companies don't have a lot of customers. They got a handful of customers. You got GM, you got Ford, you got Chrysler. All of them were in the toilet. And then you got Toyota, you got some Hondas and Nissans and those kind of things. So those were very tough times. But I will tell you one thing, is that Tom Keegle, and Ken has the utmost respect for Tom Keegle.
Time is up.
He had testified in the deposition where Ken Hall tried to bribe me, and he said that I had done an outstanding job in car haul.
Sir, I'm going to have to stop you now. Your time is up. Mr. Hall.
I think facts do matter sometimes, in most cases. And the numbers I gave you is the numbers that are reflected as the number of active members that we have working. And the contract that you may have had tough times in 2008, but you did negotiate another contract in 2011. And in 2011, you had the same kinds of wage increases. In fact, Fred, when you started as car haul director, and look at what car haulers were making, at the same time, UPSers, and I took exact same periods of time, when you took over as car haul director, car haul members were within $5 of UPS workers. That is now over $10. That is the kind of leadership that you provided. You don't know how to settle anything.
Mr. Hall, thank you. Next question is for Mr. Zuckerman. This is again was submitted by the other campaign. You have campaigned against TDU in your local for years. At one point, the question says you called them tear-down unions. In fact, you had vanity plates on your motorcycle that said TDU sucks. Why have you flip-flopped and taken their support? And that question comes from Chris Eldholtz of Local 177.
Sure. I don't consider it flip-flopping. I don't support anybody other than the membership. The membership is who pays my salary, and whatever is right for the membership, that's what I support. So if you say that I flip-flopped because I don't support HAFA anymore, or you say that I flip-flopped on this TDU issue, I don't consider it flip-flopping. What we've done is formed a coalition to run against a corrupt organization, a corrupt executive board, and they're on board with that. I have never been TDU. I want everybody to hear that, because all of you are going around saying, he's a TDU guy, he's going to tear down the union. I've never been TDU. In fact, in the latest TDU magazine, even TDU says I'm not TDU. It's never happened. So, we have formed a coalition. They agree on the same principles in this campaign that we agree on. We have to eliminate corruption. We have to eliminate the weak contracts. We have to eliminate the IBT, lying to the membership, particularly what Ken did on the health care proposal in the last UPS contract. We've got to stop all that. They agree with me on all those issues. They support my campaign. And quite frankly, I appreciate the support of that group, including at least thousands and thousands and thousands of HAFA, ex-HAFA supporters. They support my campaign, too. I guess they're all TDU guys now, too.
Mr. Hall, 45 seconds.
You are angry. I would say that let's put it this way. 10 out of 11 people who are around today in the Teamsters who ran on your slate the last time are now supporting the Hoffa Hall slate because they figured out who you are. Now, I would say this. TDU, at one time, I know they're pretty accurate, at one time, they had your picture on a milk carton and said you were missing and talked about in 2008 you made $239,000 off their dues and you were missing as the director. This came from Car Hall or from TDU. So, you know, I can't answer to whether you're TDU or not, and frankly don't care.
Mr. Zuckerman, you want to redirect?
No. There's no sense in it.
All right, we're saving time. Next question is from Mr. Hall. This came in from a text. I don't have the member's name. How could the last contract with United Parcel Service be imposed on the membership despite repeatedly being voted down by the Central Region? This contract is concession-filled, and now UPS bargaining unit employees are stuck with reduced benefits, deplorable working conditions, and no right to strike. How do you explain this?
Well, I don't even know what they're talking about right to strike, and they've never had any. There's nothing changed in the contract about that. I just saw some information that said about 4 to 1 of our members think that their health care is pretty darn good, and I've heard a lot from Fred about it, and I would actually challenge him tonight to tell me specifically what about it that is bad. And so the reason, let's call it the way it is, the reason this contract was rejected is because Fred decided that he's going to play politics with it. Now let's talk about what happened in Fred's negotiations. The company had $1,000 per member over a shuttle issue on the table. That's $8 million that Fred took off the table and traded it for a pension problem that he failed to fix in 2002. Fred has 6-hour full-time jobs, part-time, I don't know what he calls them. But I know this. Instead of worrying about full-time jobs, he's got 600 and some jobs that have a 6-hour guarantee, part-time benefits, part-time wages, except the part-timers don't get overtime when they work over 5 like they do everywhere else in the United States of America. And if you look at how much money that company saves, it's over $8 million a year on that. So that's $16 million that Fred gave back to them in concessions. It's no secret why UPS has the largest air hub in their operation in Louisville, Kentucky. It's because they got such a sweetheart deal with Fred Zuckerman.
Your response?
Well, that air hub's been there for a long time and even before me, so that's a pretty ridiculous statement. You did give up the right to strike in the contract because you failed to file the F7 notices, which is a federal requirement to have the legal ability to strike. I did 8 FOIA requests during that period of time, and you never sent it in on time. The health care is concessionary. Ken Hall stood up there and said, we're not going to pay $90 or $9 or 9 cents for health care. I just left New Jersey, and instead of the 40-cent raise that they were supposed to get, they got a 10-cent raise because 30 cents of that raise had to go to health care. And on the West Coast, they got to use their pension money. And the benefits are far inferior than the company plan. And we've got a deposition from a guy at UPS that said, you're the one that proposed team care. It wasn't the company that proposed team care.
Mr. Hall?
I don't know where to start with all that. What I would tell you is, first of all, I've sent you letters. I've sent you copies of them. Now, I know you're sensitive to the issue of not opening a contract, because you did that with Jeff Boat and had a wildcat strike in your local. I also am told that you didn't open the contract in Car Hall, and that's why you couldn't get the work preservation agreement. But I am going to one more time say to you, tell me specifically, instead of the rhetoric, tell this audience what the problem with is the health insurance, and if there is a legitimate problem, I would be happy to try to address it.
I'll stick to asking the questions over here. Mr. Zuckerman, we've had a lot of questions about pensions coming in from viewers outside this room, and I would like to pin you down specifically. What would you do differently from the current administration on the Central States Pension Plan?
What I would have done...
What would you do differently?
What would I do now to try to fix it?
Yes.
A couple things. Number one, we got to work with the plan instead of against the plan. They've never worked with the plan. Number two is that we're going to need some kind of government help to stabilize the fund. I mean, They only got enough money to last about 8 or 10 years now. We need to make sure that that happens. But nobody is going to give us money to continue to pay our bills. You're not going to get it from the government. You're not going to get it from the tooth fairy. We have to implement some kind of self-help. What that takes is organizing in our core industries and putting people back into pension funds.
Mr. Hall, would you like to comment?
Look, I don't disagree that if we had, the more members we have, the better. And that's part of a solution. But the fact is, I mean, to say that it's not me that in my campaign has been going around bashing Central States. But I will tell you that we do have to work together. But I said that earlier. I said earlier, we got to continue. We're working on plans now. We're working, and part of it is going to have to be getting help from the government. Look, they bailed out, they gave loans to all these people who destroyed the economy, and we've got to put the kind of pressure on them to do it. But there's other things that we can do, that we're trying to do, that's going to be able to convince. I mean, we got to make this work. We've got to all stop finger pointing, stop the blame game. Everybody should be working together, because this is the most important issue facing our members, and particularly our retirees.
Redirect Mr. Zuckerman.
Yeah, I think that's just precious. For them to come up here, and they've destroyed the fund over 17 years, and tell you a couple days before an election that we're out there trying to get something done. You have got to be kidding me. They're the ones that destroyed this pension fund. And now you're out there trying to... Why wasn't you doing that out there 17 years ago, trying to protect this fund? You're the one that took them out. You're the one that collapsed the fund. You're the one that sat on the executive board and didn't do a damn thing about organizing in the core industries since 2003. And now they want to say, well, yeah, it's a bad situation. Let's try to do something about it. You know what? You're too late for it. You need to leave, and you need to put people in there that are going to get the job done.
You're over time there. I'm going to give you 45 seconds, Mr. Hall, if you would like to respond.
Well, first of all, we're not too late. To say it's too late to do something to fix our members' pension is irresponsible. We have to continue to fight this. But again, I don't know what part of this you don't understand. Since 2003, you say, we haven't done this and we haven't done that, we haven't organized. We have brought more people into the freight industry since 2003 than we did the previous 40 years. And you know that, Fred. And you continue to talk about letting UPS out. And the fact is, you sat on the National Negotiating Committee and voted for it, went back and recommended to your members, and they voted for it. So, but you know what? Why don't you tell the audience, would you take UPS out of their plan and put them back into Central States if you're elected?
45 seconds, Mr. Zuckerman.
You're not going to be able to do that. You've already convinced the UPSers that you're not going to be able to get that job done because you destroyed the fund. You could not go back to the UPSers and say, hey, you know what, guys, let's put them back in the fund. I'll tell you another thing that you did is you destroyed the pensions for every UPSer that retired prior to 2008. Because under this last submission to Treasury, under MEPRA, those folks were going to get cut 70%. It's a damn good thing that that got rejected, because the people that you were supposed to represent would have lost everything that they had because of your decisions.
Thank you. Next question goes to Mr. Hall. Almost all unions have backed Ted Strickland for Ohio Senator. The International Brotherhood of Teamsters has endorsed Rob Portman, a well-known free trader. Can you explain the endorsement?
I can. I can tell you that it is simply because of the issue that we've been talking so much about. It was a very, very difficult decision because we are certainly opposed to free trade. And we've demonstrated that by leading the fight on TPP and others. I mean, as a matter of fact, we refer to TPP as NAFTA on steroids. So the sole reason is because we got a commitment that he would vote for our members on the issue of pension reform. And we have sent this message, and I told you earlier, you've heard me say a couple of times, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican. We have got people who we have supported in the past who was not willing to step up to the plate when it came to the pension issue. That's our litmus test. If they're not going to stand up for our members' pensions, they're not going to get our support. And if it's a Republican who comes forward and demonstrates by his vote, which he did, that he would support our pension issue, then we're going to swallow hard on some other issues and make sure that we're supporting somebody who's going to address the most important issue we have facing our members and retirees today.
Mr. Zuckerman?
Yeah, I can't tell you what they're thinking up there because they don't communicate with me at all ever since I started opposing their leadership. They took me off all the national committees. They took me off the grievance committees. They don't return my letters. They don't return my phone calls. So whatever they're thinking up there with regards to some kind of support for anybody, I've got no idea what they're doing. I would like to jump back, though, just a minute and talk about these 6-hour jobs that he's talking about, because he brought that up last time, said that I converted full-time jobs to part-time jobs, which is an absolute lie. The day before I took office, the then incumbents had signed an agreement with UPS to have 6-hour jobs. The 6-hour jobs actually come from the part-time ranks, not the full-time ranks. The 3-hour guys get to bid on 6-hour jobs. These guys are making $70,000 and $80,000 a year. Initially, we had gone to the IBT for help and trying to get them to invalidate that agreement because it was signed the day before we had taken office. He knows about it.
I need a little bell up here. Your time is up, sir. I'm sorry. Mr. Hall?
Yeah, let me be clear. He did ask us for help. I drove from my local to Louisville, Kentucky to prep with his lawyers to go to arbitration to overturn that because someone from his local had indeed signed it on their last day in office. The person that did that's name was Tom Treneman. Fred sued him over other issues. Fred then turned around 3 years ago and hired him and paid him lots of money as a consultant to help represent UPS workers.
Thank you. Next question goes to Mr. Zuckerman. This is from Raul Gonzalez, Local 988. He says he's a second-generation freight Teamster out of Local 988 in Houston, and he wants to ask you, Mr. Zuckerman, what you would have done in 2014 if you were the General President when the YRC asked the Teamsters for an extension of the Memo of Understanding, or they would shut the doors. Also, what would you do to rebuild Teamster power in freight?
Sure. Good questions, because the YRC thing is a mess. You know, at the first MOU, they negotiated that without knowing what was going to happen to the Teamsters. I was at the two-man committee in Dallas, Texas. Tyson Johnson was making a presentation. And he said that we're going to agree to a 25% contribution rate. I was the guy that asked the question, how is that going to affect everybody in these plans? And he says that he hadn't talked to anybody in those plans. Because of that, I went back to my membership and told them to reject the agreement, which they did unanimously. Nobody knew when the Teamsters were voting on that agreement that they were going to kick them out of the Western Conference Pension Fund. They kicked them out and put them in a 401k. I was out there campaigning not too long ago in Gardenia, California. There was one guy wanted to retire early, was within 300 hours, 300 paid hours to retire, and they told him that he couldn't do it, and now he's got to work till he's 65 years old. All because the IBT failed to do their job. With regard to the 2014 negotiations, I don't know, because I'm not privy to any communication with the IBT because I'm in the doghouse. That's the way they put it. So I don't know exactly what the negotiations were. One of the things I certainly would have done is to involve the membership in these discussions, which they didn't do. How are we going to... Time's up.
Yes, thank you, sir. Mr. Hall.
Fred, is there anything going on right in the Teamsters?
No.
YRC is a tough, it's tough. There's no question about it. In 2008, when we found out that they were on the brink of bankruptcy because, frankly, their CEO, Zollers, had run the company totally in the ground. But what we're left with is what we're dealing with today. We've got, you know, and we don't agree with lots of things they do. We don't agree with management getting paid bonuses. We don't agree with any of that. But we've got a company that provides about $2 billion per year in wages and benefits for our members, and we can't make the decision because we're an angry man that we're just going to walk away from it. We've got to give our members an opportunity, and that's what we did. We negotiated an agreement and said to our members, do you want it or you don't want it? We're not recommending. You make the decision. It was a tough one.
30 seconds, Mr. Zuckerman.
Yeah, I wanted to respond to the gentleman's question about how you rebuild in freight. You know, we have not, contrary to what Ken says with the UPS freight, we have not been organizing in freight. And they blame the pension problems on deregulation. Deregulation's 36 years ago. You got to give it a break, man. It was a long time ago. There's just as many trucks, freight companies, freight being moved, drivers on the road today that there was back then. Our problem is we haven't done anything about it. We haven't gone out there and organized anybody. Had we done that, the YRC guys would not be in the problem that they're in today because they would not be competing with the non-unions that are way down here.
Time is up, sir. Thank you. I'm going to go back to one more round with the panel as we close this up. The next question is for Mr. Hall. Mr. Rose, would you like to start?
It's another pension question. A Teamsters vice president told one of my colleagues in May that the union was working on a proposal that would create other sources of funding for multi-employer plans that require legislative action but wouldn't involve government funding. Can you tell us the status of that or any other Teamsters proposal to deal with the crisis facing multi-employer plans such as Central States?
Well, I can tell you that we continue to work on a plan that is similarly structured to what you talk about. Now, and I have to say, it's one thing to be given all of corporate America an opportunity to watch us sit here and spar with each other and have somebody downgrade everything that goes on in the Teamsters. I cannot, nor will not, reveal specifically what it is that we're talking about because at this point it's confidential, and if that were to leak, then it damages our ability to move forward at the next step with the plan.
Mr. Zuckerman, would you like to respond?
Sure. You know, the only reason why we're sparring up here is because there's a tremendous amount of people out here that believe that the administration is corrupt, they're not doing their job, they're not organizing, and so on. I've seen a copy of that plan. All right? The plan is a disaster. Because it's confidential, I am not going to reveal what's in the plan. But it's not going to work. It's a plan that they say that they have, that they're putting around, that has zero chance of success, and it's not going anywhere.
Mr. Hall, rebuttal.
I can only say I am absolutely certain he hasn't seen the plan that I'm talking about, and I don't know how he would receive anything anyway, because as he says, we don't talk to him, according to him. But this is too important of an issue to play games with, and that's what's been going on here, and it's got to stop. We have got to get all of them. We're debating tonight. There's going to be an election. But when this election is over, there's still going to be a Teamsters union to run. And we don't need to run it in the ground tonight just for the sake of elections. We need to be looking at the future, and that's exactly what we're going to do on this pension issue.
Thank you. Next question.
As a political reporter, I hear a lot about the dwindling power of organized labor in general across the country. What would you do, if elected, to boost the power of labor unions to benefit your members?
Goes to Mr. Zuckerman. Yes, I'm sorry.
Organizing. You got to get out on the streets. We're wasting a lot of money not putting it where it deserves. We got to organize. We got to get out there and reach out to folks. We've got to. That should be a #1 priority. I've got 3 priorities that I think are very important. 1 is to fix the pension problem. 2 is to rid the Teamsters Union of corruption. And 3 is organizing. Those are the top 3 things that need to be done. If we do that, I think we stand a chance of success. The way we're doing it now, not many people want to join the Teamsters Union because of all the things that I just said. Everybody knows it's out there. Everybody knows that there's a reputation out there, and it's very difficult to organize. We've got to change that. We've got to change that mindset to make people want to be in the Teamsters Union. I tell this story a lot because I think it's a very important story. 37 years ago, I joined the Teamsters Union. I used to look at them guys in the trucks and the freight trucks and stuff, and I admired them guys. Them guys had everything. They had good wages, they had benefits, they had job security, they had vacation time, they had a boat in their driveway, they went home at a decent hour at night, and they had it all. And you know what? I wanted that. Today it's not like that, and we have got to get that back.
Mr. Hall?
Well, I can tell you one thing for certain. I still admire Teamsters, and I still admire this organization. But in terms of your question, and it's one of the things that when I said earlier, we're not just talking about a presidential race, we're talking about members of Congress and on the state level. And one of the things that we're doing is trying to go and operate more to state level, because we know nothing's going to happen in Congress. I mean, they can't agree on what day it is. And so a lot of the action, if you, so to speak, in politics is at the state level. And that's why we're gearing up. We're having meetings with our activists around the country. We'll invite you too, Fred. And we're trying to work on some of the legislation at the state level so that we're building power amongst our members. And that's what we have to do to get there. We're not going to get there through traditional means of dealing with Congress.
Mr. Zuckerman?
I appreciate the invite. You know, for years and years and years, haven't been invited to anything. In fact, you couldn't even return my phone calls or my letters or whatever else. That's all I got.
Thank you. And now we're going to move to Mr. Harrelson Mr. Meyerson, excuse me, with the last question for Mr. Hall.
Mr. Hall, there has been an upsurge in worker mobilization on the streets in the last couple of years in the Fight for 15, and a lot of low-wage workers mobilizing. None of the unions involved in that have really been able to translate that into membership gains. It's really hard. I hardly need to tell you, both of you guys, that organizing in the private sector is really difficult right now. But is there any way the Teamsters can really play a greater role in these mobilizations? And do you see any possibility of translating some of that energy into real gains for the Teamsters down the line?
Actually I do. And I think, as I said, we partner with lots of other unions on a daily basis. And I think that's one of the ways to really go back to the previous question. One of the ways of us building power is getting more people in this country who have the respect and the desire to join unions. It's not going to happen overnight. And we knew when the Fight for 15 started, that's not going to result in a lot of new membership now, but it builds on that progress. I mean, it's like, a lot of people don't know this. We've got UPSers. Their average part-time rate is $14.98 an hour. But when you plug in their benefits, it's about $31 an hour. So we try to use those kinds of examples and to inspire people to be able to work, to go to the boss. And that's what we've been trying to do. We've been trying to give them empower them to go to the boss and demand it and be willing to stand up for it. It's difficult. It's not going to happen in the next year or two. But I would say to you that we're making progress on that issue, and we're going to continue to do that.
Well, the Teamsters Union the current Teamsters administration needs to change their focus on the mergers and raiding of other unions. We're not going out into the public sector and trying to organize those folks. Under my administration, that's exactly what we're going to do. The public sector folks, they need representation, and that's great. We'll get all we can get, but we can't neglect our core industries, which we have done. I've said it probably a dozen times tonight, because it is absolutely critical that we do that, or we are going to lose our core industries.
Mr. Hall, 30-second rebuttal.
Again, I think, I continue to hear about core industries, and I continue to tell you that we've organized more in the core industry than we have in the past 12 years than we have in the previous 30. It just hasn't caught on in Fred's local yet. He's organized. He's got more resources than most locals, and he's organized, I believe, 108 workers in the last 5 years, 4 out of 8. And by the way, during that time, you had 4 companies that decertified or said we want out of the union, out of 5, because I assume no representation.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. We're now going to move to the closing statements. Again, as drawn by lot, Mr. Hall will go first, Mr. Zuckerman will go last. Mr. Hall, 2 minutes.
I'm incredibly proud of the union. And I predicted that Fred might be a little angry, and I think you've seen that. But I think this union we have a great union. We're responsible for keeping people in the middle class and moving them up. But we do have issues. We got issues like pension that we've got to continue to work together on regardless of who wins this election. And so we don't need to have scorched earth and destroy in this union in debates and in campaigns. We need to let the members vote, and I would urge all of our members to vote, by the way. But we need to be talking about what the real issues are. And pension is a real issue. You know, I just got to say, Fred's running with a guy, well, the guy was running for Fred's spot. He lost his own election. The people who knew him best voted against him by 70% in his own local in 804. Now, he's running for General Secretary Treasurer. Fred has played games with these contracts for political purposes, and it's a shame. I mean, he's got his running mate, Randy Shepler, in Local 30. Him with the principal officer, Gino, who signed off saying they're going to endorse their supplement, and it was the greatest supplement ever. We even found some emails the other day where they was emailing the company saying, we're out there trying to sell it. They just played politics with it and then lied to their members and said they didn't do it. He talks about corruption. He hasn't answered the question yet. I think in my local, that would be an incredibly easy decision. If we had a steward who committed battery and was found guilty, I'd remove him as a steward. We haven't heard what happened there. He's taken money from somebody in Rhode Island, one of the delegates and one of his running mates people, who retaliated against another member and got them disciplined. That's not what this union's about. This union's about us all working together. This union's about continuing to have the best contracts in the labor movement, which we do, and it's about working together to solve the problems that face us. I thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I ask you, regardless of who you're going to vote for, cast your ballot.
Thank you. Mr. Zuckerman, 2 minutes.
Hoffa can't run on his record. It's a record of 17 years of failure. That's why he's not here tonight. Hoffa campaigns on providing strong contracts, better health care coverage, and good pension and retirement benefits. Nothing can be further than the truth. Contracts in every industry have been gutted because of Hoffa's failed leadership. Health care has also been gutted by this administration. UPSers remember Ken Hall saying, we're not going to pay $90, $9 or 9 cents for health care. We ended up paying much more through a reduction in benefits, using wage increases and pension contributions to pay for our health care, in addition to a 600% cost increase in retirement benefits. And now, over 500,000 Teamsters in Central States, Local 707, Local 469, New York State, and others are at risk of losing their pensions because of Hoffa's neglect to organize, his failure to put participants into the Teamster pension plans, and by allowing participating employers to leave the funds. It's time to stop lying to the membership. We face serious challenges in our union that will never be fixed with an administration that is corrupt, inept, weak, and in bed with the employers. Our members are willing to fight for a better future. They want leadership to fight with them. It's time we had leadership that will stand with the members instead of taking the sides of the employers. My promise to you is I will get rid of the corruption in our union. Anyone who commits a crime against the membership has no business being in a leadership position. We will organize in our core industries and increase membership because that's what will strengthen the job security and pensions in those industries. We will find solutions to the multi-employer pension crisis in order to save the pensions of the hundreds of thousands of Teamsters who will otherwise lose their pensions because of Hoffa. Vote Teamsters United. Let's fix the problem standing between us and get a brighter future. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. This concludes the 2016 Teamster International Officer Candidate Forum.